Okay, I thought maybe we'd start with, who is this guy? How did he get connected to Client Feedback Tool? And then what I'll jump into then is to talk about what I was asked to talk about, which is how do you have that elusive best project I ever worked on store experience every time. I think people have an island or two in their career up to this point where they can say that was one of those times. Why can't we have that every time? And I think, for example, Client Feedback Tool would be one of those links to that. Why is this question important? Why does Darren talk about it, and why should I care? Why is it hard to answer? I'll be looking for some audience participation on that. I need a little help as far as direction to go on that, and would like some additional ideas. And then I'll share with you a couple of bases to cover that would get you off and running and help lift you and enhance your situation from where you are now. One of them is going to be a common language, and the other base that we'll cover is, besides common language, is establishing some ground rules. So that's kind of the plan here we'll try to do in 20 minutes. So myself, I help folks answer the question, what would life be like if all my teams collaborated effectively? Interesting question, right? And there's two ways to do that. There's winning hearts, there's winning minds. I just focus on the heart part. I would say on the mind part, or the head part, you look at things like business process, which would be lean construction, lean engineering, lean healthcare. I think everybody's heard of that idea mapped over from Toyota, lean automobile manufacturing, taking waste out of a work process. That's mind stuff. I would also say technology, building information modeling, for example, that's all mind or head stuff. I don't go there at all. It's just working on how do you win hearts and showing folks how to do that. If you've got minds or heads, you've got compliance. If you've got hearts and minds, you've got collaboration. You got to have both. And the best way to do that is to connect that to a hard business objective. It might be retention, especially nowadays with the climate that we have. If you look at another example, those of you that are familiar with healthcare, 1 to 3% of their reimbursement from Medicare and Medicaid is based on patient quality of care scores. So why should we learn to collaborate effectively, or enhance our collaboration? Well, it's to get more of that 1 to 3%, because that's the difference between profit and loss for a healthcare system in a given year. Razor thin margins. So that's why. I just wanted to kind of give you some background. When I met Ryan a couple of years ago, it was at a conference. I walked by his table. I walked by it a second time. And then the third time, after he started freaking out a little bit and wondering who I was, what I was doing, I walked up to him, we talked a little bit, and I knew very quickly I was looking for a way to measure hearts with a number, measure collaboration with a number. Anecdotes will take you far, but not as far as we need to go in order to hang and continue to invest in that idea of learning to collaborate effectively, holding people accountable in a meaningful way. The people are the X factor in any of our projects. And until we get our arms around the X factor, until we can nail Jell-O to the wall, I don't know how far we can go with business process or with technology. I mean, if people's hearts don't change, you can still be a jerk and be successful with a new business process. But if you can have their heart change, that's where the gold is. To me, that's the next level for our industry. I've been working in the industry for about 10 years, and it was on accident starting about 10 years ago. But that's a story for another time. So I knew when I saw this, this was a way for me to measure hearts with hard data. So that takes care of that. So this question of that best project you ever worked on story every time, why is that an important question? To me, I think it's an inside-out answer. It's to increase my own satisfaction working on projects. If I increase my own satisfaction, then there's a chance that it's going to be contagious and it's going to pass on, rub off on other people. And I really, again, it's a different way of thinking about it, but that's how I would think about it. If you do your own work on answering the question of why do I want to have that best project experience, I've got to start with myself and answer the question for myself and then pass it on to folks. As far as why is it important? Well, it's about satisfaction, but it's for me, and then I pass it on to somebody else. This is from a project team that I've worked with, and we had very tight parameters. I had exactly 1 hour, okay, 1 hour to make a difference with them. And the one spot I chose was, let's create a team satisfaction statement. What about this project, or what about your best project made you satisfied, made you feel good? And what we cobbled together from an entire project team was one simple statement: clear, timely communication / decision making that helps everything on the project fall into place and get in and out faster, is what the rest of that is. And so we were doing things around satisfaction, and people would always, why are we doing this? For example, why are we surveying? Well, I just go back to this. This was what keeps us on point. And you think, well, that's great, Darren, but what if somebody doesn't want to follow this? Well, I think the reward for following this is the personal satisfaction. I think the consequence for not following this is asking them the question, do you want to be wanted on the next project? I'm not going to answer it for you. That's for you to answer. That's a personal question. But it keeps us very focused. That to me is why it's important. Why is it hard to answer, do you think? Anybody want to take a shot? Why is it hard to answer the question, you know, how do we have a best project we ever worked on experience every time? What gets in the way from us doing that? Can anybody help me out? It's different for everybody. So we need a common language. We need a common language maybe, right? Okay, great. Anything else besides establishing a common language?
I think it's too hard to achieve it.
It's too hard to achieve it.
It's too difficult to find unicorns and rainbows.
Unicorns and rainbows. I think that's great. I think that's important to kind of know where we stand, right? And what's in front of us, what are the obstacles? So how do you break that down? Is anybody seen that ever successfully done? Okay. So I'm going to segue then. I think, why is it difficult to answer? I think there's a couple of reasons. I think it's the common language, which kind of leads us in. Establishing not a new dictionary, but having a few key terms that everybody can nod and say, okay, yes, that's what it is. I think another piece on that is that we try to do too much in terms of, for example, ground rules. And that way, what happens is that we can't hold people accountable for just some very basic things because we're trying to do too much. So I'm going to share a story with you to give an example of what not to do. When I first started talking to folks about collaboration, I'd be in somebody's office, and if I ask them the question, so is your firm collaborative? I mean, that is such a non-starter question. I mean, who's going to say no, right? Well, of course I'm collaborative. That's just our culture. Our clients even tell us that we're collaborative. So how am I supposed to talk to that, right? I mean, I was already dead. And then one day in jury duty in Dallas County, not far from here, in the federal building, I made it to the jury box of 50, and from there they were going to choose 10 and then start the trial. And the attorneys trotted out, and they began with, okay, we got to create some common language here, and so burden of proof. This trial that you might be participating in is going to be decided on a burden of proof, but there's different types of burden of proof. And there was a spectrum of 5 they gave us, and to keep it laser, the first was suspicion. You were in the wrong place, Howard, at the wrong time. And we'll skip a few. We got preponderance of evidence. Do you realize in some cases it only takes 51% of the evidence in your favor or against you to have a decision? 51%, that's it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got beyond a reasonable doubt. That's 99% certainty. So there's a lot of things that can happen depending on the type of case and what's been agreed upon as far as the burden of proof standard. So they got me to thinking, okay, with collaboration, what is it not? It is not association. It is not participation. It is not coordination. It is not cooperation. It is collaboration. And then defining what collaboration is and then what it's not. So that would be an example to you of establishing the common language. Or in this particular case, team satisfaction. What is it? Let's be clear on it. And that way you've at least got some very flexible, very nimble accountability. I mean, it's a start. All we're doing is wanting to cover a few bases that gets us a little further and enhances what we're doing. I'm not saying that anybody's project team is broken, but there's always an opportunity for improvement as long as we keep it light. So that would be, the common language nuggets that I would share with you. Does anybody else establish common language, or what's the most powerful, you can answer it either way, what's the most powerful word that you've had to find or phrase you've had to find maybe at a project kickoff? Or maybe at a team that you work with, what is some language that you've heard that you could share that would help us? And I may steal it. I borrow it. Goals. Can you tell me more?
So what are the common and achievable goals of the group?
What are the common and achievable goals of the group? Okay. And does anybody have anything additional? I don't want to connect all the dots, but I think we could probably see the benefit of catching the one or two goals on paper that are going to mean the most. I'm a big 80-20 principle person. There's only a small number of anything that are responsible for majority of the effects in the universe. An example of that would be, did you know that 10 to 20% of the music ever recorded in the history of mankind is played on the radio 90% of the time? There's only a small number of roads and intersections in any city, including Dallas, that are responsible for majority of the congestion and accidents, 60, 70, 80, 90% of it. It could even be Raleigh or Dallas, it doesn't really matter. And as guys, we've got our favorite shirts, right? We got these things in our closet that were purchased for us probably, but we wear the same 5% of our clothes 90, 95% of the time. I've got my blue shirt. You know what color my shirt was yesterday? It was blue. Now it had a button tab. This is free floating here, right? But the fact of the matter is that it's like the Force from Star Wars, Luke and Leia Skywalker. You can either go with the Force or against the Force. So again, going back to just a couple of terms that matter will make a difference. Just trying to kind of put some evidence behind that. Yes, Howard?
We had a discussion about the word integrity, which is one of the core values of the company I work with, and I think a lot of misunderstanding until we had the conversation what it means. A lot of people equate integrity with simply being honest, being truthful, being professional, being ethical. And in this context, we said it's also about doing what you say you're going to do, and following through and taking responsibility. That was useful.
Yeah, very good. Now, what was a result of that or a byproduct of that you noticed?
Everybody holding each other accountable, and people taking individual responsibility in the first place.
Right.
And Darren, by
Yes.
common language, I don't know if this fits into that or not, but what Sona and I were just talking about, we're in the legal industry, so a little bit different space. One thing we're lacking is the clarity and definition of roles and responsibilities on these teams. But to hear you talk about project managers, everybody has a really clear role and understanding of that role and what they do and how they fit on the team. But we don't. So it's a challenge to have lawyers collaborate at all. So is that a different category?
No. I think it's universal. Again, I think we try to do too much, and we a lot of times are going to overthink this stuff. And it's a matter of keeping it all out in front of you. So I would even say with agreements, for example, for these projects, what are the 3 to 5, I usually try to go 1 or 2, but in the legal case, probably 3 to 5 at the most terms that we could define that would solve a majority of the issues. And let's just go for that. We get beyond 5, accountability, whoosh, very hard, out the window, and so on and so on. What we need is, we don't need perfection, and that's another problem I think that we have. We do to ourselves. I understand that. And we've got a lot of engineers in the room, right? We need additional success.
So to summarize the conference so far, lawyers, engineers, and architects all struggle greatly with We got a common thread here.
Yes, yes,
It's a tremendous opportunity.
It is, that's a good way to look at it.
But it's eating the elephant, especially like you said with legal terms. It's one bite at a time. You know, we had a conversation over here, or just at the break, of all the PMs have to use the CFT, and the question that I asked was, what if you, based on their behavior, of the PM's behavior, say you got 10 of them, 2 of them are really taken off with it. Based on their behavior, why don't you spend all of your time and energy in that, with those 2 people? Because you just want to go where you're wanted. If you go where you're not wanted, what's the point? And on top of that, is it being a good steward of the resources of the organ? I'm getting way off tangent here, but it's being a good steward of the company's resources, and they help you build a beautiful case. And then what does that do? What are the implications of that on the 8 that haven't embraced it yet? Anyway, that's a rhetorical question. So let's come back on point. So we've gotten to that. Let's go to, what do we got? Ground rules. So ground rules, if you could pull it up and pop that, I think to like 175%. Ground rules are how, as another base you could cover, and ground rules that will help you with how people should conduct or manage themselves. And let me contrast that with operational rules or relational rules of engagement. That's how you interact with other people. We're just going to talk about ground rules, which is handling yourself. I think it's important, for example, to share with people, to be successful on this team, this is what I need from you. And I'm going to share a story from, as far as, okay, so what if they don't do that? Or what if they do that? Well, the advantage is obvious if they do that. If they, again, it's, do you want to be wanted on the next team, the next project? The consequences in this case, how you handle that, I coach a 12-year-old boys soccer team. And I had this young man, high school age, he's the referee that day, and he said, okay, coaches, he called the coaches meeting there at center field real quick, this is how I'm going to handle it. If I have to say something to you, the first time I say it, I'm going to ask you, for example, get back in your box. There's a very small area on the sideline that you have to stay in as the soccer coach of the team. And I'll ask you once. If I have to say something twice, I'm going to tell you to get back in your box. And if I have to say something a third time, I'm going to walk you to the parking lot. So I think with ground rules, you really shouldn't have to say anything. It's the kind of stuff that's common sense. I've got them listed up here, but be on time, be prepared, and be ready to engage. I mean, things that you shouldn't have to say, but you do to keep people accountable. Get them on a sheet of paper, put them in a file folder, and put them in a drawer. And then you use the soccer referee idea if you'd like to borrow that, and that should be the end of it. But I think just trying those 2 ideas and seeing if that works for you, that would be a couple of bases you could cover to move closer to getting that best project you ever worked on experience every time. And I may just say one other thing here to wrap us up, and that would be another base. And where I got to here. So the operational and the relational rules, that's where the opportunity is, with how other people make you feel, or how you make people feel when they've got to work with you. I mean, if we're talking about hearts, we need to know what's in people's hearts. So with Client Feedback Tool, what that's done for me is that we decide on a couple of relational rules of engagement, heart type things. And we measure that now, and we can tag a number to it. And that would be the next spot you could jump off to help hit that best project you ever worked on experience story every time. That'd be another way to kind of bring it full circle and put a bow on it. And unless anybody has any questions, I think we're at time.
At the end of
yeah.
the session.
Okay. Very good.
Darren, thank you.
Very good.